The Santa Ynez Community Service District to order, October 16th, 2019 at 5:30 p.m. And this evening, we have a director on speakerphone that is going to participate, but we're going to go ahead and move forward with the agenda now. Can you hear me, Director Mueller?
I can.
Okay, we're going to go ahead and start the meeting now. Okay, so, Wendy, would you like to go ahead and do the roll call?
Director Beard?
Here.
Director Jones?
Here.
Director D'Ambra?
Here.
Director Mueller?
Here.
Okay. And will everyone please stand and I'll lead you in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, agenda item 4 is director comments. If any of the directors have any reports that they would like to give on meetings that they have attended or anything that they choose to comment on various district activities.
I don't either.
And Director Mueller?
I don't.
Okay, then we shall move on to number 5, public comments. Do we have any comments from the public for items that are not on the agenda this evening? Okay, does not appear that we do. Now we are going to move on to item 6, which is the consent agenda. This is where we review the treasurer's dashboard report and the minutes from our last meeting. And Director Mueller, I believe that you received this information via email, so you're familiar with it. Did you have any corrections or changes or questions on this?
I don't.
Any other director?
No.
Okay. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes of the regular meeting of September 18th, 2019?
I'll make the motion.
Director Beard has made the motion.
Second.
Do you
Wendy?
want to make a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented? Or do you want
Yes.
to pull each item?
I'm sorry, the entire consent agenda. Thank you, Wendy. So your motion is to approve the consent agenda, and your second is to approve it. And Wendy, you can go ahead and
Okay,
do
so
that.
we have a motion by Beard and a second by D'Ambra to approve the consent agenda as presented. We'll do a roll call vote. Director Beard?
Aye.
Director Jones?
Aye.
Director D'Ambra?
Aye.
Director Mueller?
Aye.
Motion passes.
Okay, now we're going to move on to item 7, which is discussion and possible appointment to fill the vacancy on the board of directors. Everyone here knows that we have a vacancy. We are down 1 director and we have 2 applicants. Their applications have been included in our packet that we got, and that would be David Seymour and Frank Redford, both applied.
There's actually 3 applications in the packet.
Oh, I'm sorry, one of the gentlemen who applied is not in our district, so he's not eligible.
Okay. I
Yes,
wasn't sure.
sorry.
I thought there was 2 and then I saw 3 in there, so I just wanted to make sure.
Good question, no. We are not going to consider him just because he's not able to
Yeah.
serve. Okay, so this is the first time that I have ever been involved in a replacement of a director. So we have the applications, and I would like to invite the applicants to speak if they would have any comments or anything they would like to say to the board before we go into discussion. Yes, Mr. Seymour.
You'd like me to come up there?
However you're comfortable.
Sure. I just think everyone, I don't know how many people know me here, but my name's Dave Seymour. I've been on this board before. I was on the board for 14 years. I was president 3 times. I was very active and serious about what I did here, so I did join the CSDA, the local, there's a Central Coast chapter, but I also joined the Santa Barbara chapter, and I was on their board. also to be involved, and especially our valley. I ran for LAFCO, and I was on LAFCO as an alternate. Short time that I was on that. And we've lived in the valley for 30 years. And that's just my introduction.
No, good job. Does anyone have any questions of Mr. Seymour? Then we can move on. Mr. Mueller, are you still on the line?
I am.
Okay, I heard a little beep, funny little beep going, and I wanted to make sure before we proceeded. Okay, Mr. Redfern, our other applicant is getting ready to speak. This is Frank Redfern.
Frank Redfern, lived in the valley since 1974. My parents and their parents have lived here. I love the valley. I've worked for the sewer district for 17 years. I have a great interest in seeing, that it continues to be a great valley, and I think I can help a lot with that. I'm, not going anywhere, and I hope to be able to serve.
Thank you.
Thank you.
No questions? Mr. Mueller, did you hear Mr. Redfern all right? And did you have any questions?
I did. I missed it. I missed a little bit because it kind of cut out on me. I really apologize. I'm on a cell phone and I may not have the best of reception. And Frank, if I could ask you a question, I did come to understand that you were employed by SYCSD, and I believe that was for a short term, and I didn't quite hear how many years you said you were there.
It was a short time, yes, 17 years.
17 years. Okay.
Yes.
And if I could, should I ask you the circumstances around why you left, and did things go on good terms?
They left our all right terms. After 17 years, I had a new administrator. At the time, she had bought a lot of equipment and added a lot of expense to the district. And I think that I was probably the most expensive employee at the time. And she announced to me that my hours would be doubled, but my pay would stay the same. And if I wanted to continue working for the district. And I said that wasn't an acceptable contract, that, here in the United States, you work more hours, you work harder, you get paid for that time. So my contract wasn't renewed, and we left amicably. There was nothing else really to do, but that was what she wanted, and that's what we agreed to.
Okay. Well, thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Did you have any questions for Mr. Seymour?
I don't, other than to say that Dave certainly has been on our board for a long time and has a lot of history, and and a couple times since we've been with the new board, he's been quite helpful piping in about things that I couldn't even remember happening. So. Anyway, I certainly know Dave. I don't really need to ask him any questions. So, but thank you. Thank you for your answers, Frank.
Okay, thank you. And are there any questions from the public? Any comments? Okay. Board discussion. Frank is already engaging in it, but I would like to say that I am the one who met Mr. Redfern and told him that we had a seat available. We don't know each other outside of that exchange, and the fact that he has attended every meeting and subcommittee meeting that he has been aware of since the process started. I do have a question about the process for Mr. Battles. The clock, I believe, started ticking. Mr. Mueller was very concerned about not being here. And so what happens if we do not make a decision tonight?
You have until October the 20th, you have 60 days to fill a vacancy.
Correct.
And that 60-day period runs on October the 20th, which is a Sunday. And if you don't make the appointment, then the Board of Supervisors has the option of filling the vacancy. And if they don't fill the vacancy, then it goes to an election.
This close to an election, it goes to an election, like within a year
You
of a
can call it,
four-year
you can
seat?
you can call a special election for that to happen.
Can or must?
You can. Let me just look at that language.
Yeah, I would have liked to know that. I was aware of the 60-day clock starting, and I thought that it might be ending tonight. And when I spoke with Director Mueller, that was a concern that I had. But so actually, it's tonight, Thursday or Friday, and I do understand that the county can make an appointment at, but this is just about a year out from the election, and it's less than a year from when people are going to be pulling papers. So we're 9 or 10 months away from the beginning of the election. So that would be a separate agenda item, but just to make that point clear, that if we are not able to make a decision tonight, that there may be a legal possibility that the county may. I know that I personally, if I have an opportunity to weigh in with my supervisor, that's not something that I would want to have a special election that's going to happen in 8 months anyway. That's my opinion.
Okay, so what it's, I'm looking at my memo relating to this, and I'll find the specific statutory language. My memo says, if the district fails to take action to fill the vacancy within 60 days, the County Board of Supervisors may fill the vacancy by appointment or by ordering the district to call an election.
Oh, well, that
it's
doesn't scare
it's
me.
permissive.
Now, I think we have a pretty hardworking supervisor who pays attention and listens to her constituents. Whether we agree with all the votes or not, I think that we'll be able to work with the county on this either way. So, yes, Mr. Higgins.
Just one other thing. We did have an election in which there were 4 people on the ballot. 2 of them were elected. There's still 2 on that roll that have already been voted on by the people. I think we should maybe give some credence to that because, like I say, those people have been in front of the public is aware of them, they have voted their vote, whereas what's happening tonight is just an appointment, it's just one person nominating somebody else. And I believe the election would allow your constituents, our constituents, they know who the person is, they've already voted for them, and he's actually next in line on that list, and that list is less than 2 years old. And I think that should carry some weight.
If I may, Mr. Higgins, the vote was overwhelmingly.
Oh, yes, I understand that. Oh, I understand that.
Okay, excuse me.
Excuse me, I'm the chairperson, so let's go through me. I'm recognizing Director D'Ambra.
It was overwhelming in the community that they wanted change.
Right.
Okay? The people voted and said, we don't like this direction, we don't like the leadership, we want change. And we had no names, virtually.
Right.
You had 30, 40 years of experience between you. Is that a fair, close estimate?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so my point being is the people, I don't see it as they're recognized by the community. The community said, in candor, we want you out. Okay? That's how I interpret it, my opinion.
All right.
Secondly, we are replacing a gentleman who was on the east side of the district, who now, if we were to replace him with Mr. Seymour, that would put 4 people west of Calzada, even though we are an at-large district. I think it's incumbent on us to replace like with like where humanly possible, okay? And again, this is only till the following election, which is next November, 14 months. At that time, the slate is clean. So I feel that that's an important factor, certainly more important than losing an election. is to replace like for like. Mr. Redford's been here a long time, he's there, lived in the district probably longer than most of us, or all of us perhaps. And for that reason, I'm skewing my vote in that direction. A couple others, and those would be, I found the last board dealing with you gentlemen, where it says Community Service District, that service, I never saw that. When I would come here personally, I stood up there when this place was packed with people in 2016, and I asked all of you board members, 5 of you, to pull this back, let's have some meetings, educate us, inform us of what your goals and objectives are, and you all stood there like this, like I was from Mars. Not one of you had the professional courtesy to say, yeah, we should talk to you guys. You just ordered us annexed. That is not service. That has nothing to do with service. That was a personal agenda on that board's part. And that's probably the main reason the community asked you guys to leave. Okay? And again, this is my feelings on it. I've seen, since that time, it's been what, a year, almost a year now, not one board member, not one previous board member had the common decency and courage to say, we made a mistake, I'd like to apologize. You know who did? Paul Hood came up to us and said, I want to apologize the way this thing was handled. He said, I've been here 31 years and this will never happen again, and you have my apologies. And I thought, disinterested third party coming out saying something was wrong and took the courage to apologize. And the 5 board members that were here were still sitting like this. That is nothing to do with service. So I have, as you can tell, a bad taste from personal experience dealing with you guys. You know, service means you come to us, okay? We come to you, excuse me. You guys, you 2 gentlemen were in those same 2 seats in the earlier part of this year when I wanted to put out a flyer to inform our community what we're doing. Real simple, real basic. And you guys say, oh, we tried that, we shouldn't do that, we didn't. I couldn't understand for the life of me, gentlemen, why you would protest or be boisterous about trying to communicate to the very people you serve. And, you know, I just don't understand your logic. You know, we put out a little flyer, we informed them, nobody died, nobody got hurt, and I got some positive feedback, except for the people who said that some of their letters were stapled together, and they asked me, well, if it's folded, why in the world would you staple it? That's the worst feedback I got. Other people said, I didn't even know we had a service district. First time I've ever heard from them. And you guys have been here 40 years.
Well,
So my feeling is, I appreciate you, I congratulate you for your service, but I think it's time to move on. This is an appointment, and come November, the slate will be clean, and jump into the fire at that time. That's my feeling, gentlemen.
I understand. As to the talk about the flyer that was sent out, we did do that, but we never got any feedback from it.
Sir, you don't need feedback. We're not looking for feedback. We're looking for dissemination of information, period.
okay, Director D'Ambra, I think you've made your point really clear, and I concur with a lot of what you say, but the election is over, and I appreciate our applicants coming in because you are putting yourself out there just as these 2 gentlemen did when they ran, and it's hard to do. Most people aren't willing to do that, and I appreciate that. So did you finish your point, Mr. Higgins?
Just to say, well, just one more thing to say, that I disagree with some of what you say, Bob, but that's okay. That's what we can do. That's why we're on these boards, is to
Meet in the middle.
Is to discuss and
Yes.
try to weed stuff out. And it's, again, obviously, the board's decision to make, but it's just something I felt that, you know, I wanted to bring up, to put it out there in an open meeting. So it was at least discussed, and we got a discussion out of it.
Yes, and I appreciate that. We have a pesky fly buzzing around. It was bothering you, and now it's coming after me. But I think that your point is taken, that the third runner-up, I understand that, but I think that the law is really clear that the board makes a decision, so there's no legal compulsion that that's a consideration. It is definitely up to the board to make a selection.
I just offered it up, that's it.
No, and I understand. Director Mueller, did you have any questions or anything to add to this discussion?
Well, and my feelings are, certainly, Bob, I was one of those 5. And, since we have this new board now, we definitely have transparency is front and center now. We definitely made mistakes. We all make mistakes, for sure. So, going forward, I don't think there's any going backwards, right? We are definitely focused on transparency and it going forward. And that's where my head is at. Anybody that we add to this board now is in no way, shape, or form going to turn that around back into non-transparency. That's my only point.
How about you, Director Beard? Do you have anything to add?
No, I don't have anything else to add. I think what's been said is sufficient.
Okay.
Just one
Yes.
clarification on procedure. You're saying what happens if the district doesn't make the appointment. I said it goes to the Board of Supervisors. The district has the option of filling the vacancy either by appointment or by the district itself calling an election. So you can do either of those 2 things, but you have the same 60-day period within which to do one or the other. And then if you call an election, then it would be at the next scheduled election. That's 130 days or more after you make the election, have an election for that.
Well, based on my experience of 2 years, and you guys don't feel that new anymore, but there really was a 2-year learning curve for me. I came in, I had ideas, I had things that I wanted to accomplish, but I had to learn how a board works, and I learned a lot about the district, and I still have a lot to learn. So that's part of what I'm factoring in here. But I think listening to Mr. Battles talk, my first 2 years here, I believe that we were functioning with a 4-person board. I do not believe that all 5 members were fully engaged in the board. And I think everybody has varying degrees of engagement due to their interests, capabilities, and the time they have to put into it. But I think that our empty seat has been empty for a long time. So I really care about having fresh perspective, somebody who's going to come in, be engaged, of course transparent. And you're so right, Director Mueller. We have been transparent. We've been reaching out to the people we work with, both literally work with, and people in the community and other agencies. And we're getting a lot done, and I'm excited about that. And so I agree with you. This is all about moving forward. And if nobody has anything else to say, then I'm comfortable moving on with the vote. And you are taking the vote in what order, Wendy?
We need a motion first.
Okay, we will do that. But when you do the vote, a constituent said, why did the vote order change? And I thought that the 2 years I was on, it was in the order of when you were elected.
No.
Okay. So you just go
I
this
just go
direction?
with that,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, well, that will answer that question for the person who asked me. So, do we have a motion for the appointment?
I'll make the motion for appointment for a new director.
And who would that be?
Mr. Redford?
Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. So,
So we have a motion by Director D'Ambra and a second by Director Beard to appoint Frank Redford as, to fill the vacancy. We'll do a roll call vote. Director Beard?
Aye.
Director Jones?
aye.
Director D'Ambra?
Aye.
Director Mueller?
No.
Motion passes 3-1.
Very good. Okay, now the next thing on the agenda, and I really do thank you, Mr. Seymour, for coming in, and I understand putting yourself out there, and I thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for giving us a choice. I know when I talked to Director Mueller, he was the only applicant, I believe. that sometimes we don't even, our GM has commented on that also. So we were fortunate to have a choice, and we do appreciate all that you have done in the community and on this board. Thank you. Okay, so the next item on the agenda would be to swear in the new, administer the oath of office for the newly appointed director. So that would be you, Mr. Redfern. I have not done this before, Wendy, so.
You just sit there.
Okay,
Ready for
walk me
it?
through.
We're supposed to have like a cake or something after
Or they
this.
can direct us.
You guys got that, I didn't.
Okay, you want to repeat after me? I, Frank Redfern, do solemnly swear
Which one is that?
that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of California
Constitution of the State of California
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
that I will bear true faith
that I will bear true faith
and allegiance
and allegiance
to the Constitution of the United States
to the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California,
and the Constitution of the State of California,
that I take
that I take
this obligation freely
this obligation freely
without any mental reservation
without any mental reservation
or purpose of
or purpose of
evasion, and that I will,
that I will,
well and faithfully,
well and faithfully,
discharge the duties upon
discharge the duties upon
which I am about to enter.
that I am about to enter.
All right, congratulations. We'll have you sign the forms and have a seat.
Welcome, Mr. Redfern. I talked loud and somebody overheard me one day downtown. So, welcome to the board, and we'll just jump right in. What is going to be a little bit tricky is navigating the binder. You might have a different thing, but that took me a little while to get the hang of even finding. So right now, if you go to the front page of your binder, you will see the agenda, and right now we just did 7A and 7B. So we're going to go to 7C, which is discussion and possible action regarding procedures for adding an agenda at the request of directors.
So yours, they have tabs. So these tabs are the items here.
Okay.
And there is no staff report on
So
this.
it's empty, so your next item will be this one. So there's no, you can look here, it says no staff report.
Okay.
But trust me, Wendy will be helping you again, or we at the table.
Sure.
It takes a little bit to get the hang of that part, or it did for me anyway. So the next item we have is about placing things on the agenda. And I'm going to just move through this and then we'll have public comments. Moving things through the discussion and possible action regarding procedures for adding things to the agenda at the request of directors. And once again, there's no staff report on this. And part of it gets back to, there was a time, my first 2 years of this board, I was in the minority, and often, as we just had a 3-1 vote, we often had 4-1 votes, and I would be the one. And I was learning, and I also had a different vision for how I wanted the district to go. And I often wanted things put on the agenda, and I often was seen as a little bit pesky for these 4 seasoned directors. So I don't know if you remember this, Wendy, that you would give me policy and procedures, and then you would come and you brought me this highlighted, and it's the chairperson has to call on the directors. I had to learn that director etiquette. And as far as the agenda, it's not really clear. I checked with a couple of other boards. In our policy, it says may, and me as the chairperson and the person with the most experience at 2.5 years after, we had people who had decade plus, I would go to the rule book, the policy and procedure manual, and try and figure it out. And then we have Mr. Battles, who is our legal counsel that we can consult. But I know that Director Higgins, as chairperson, and also Director Seymour, felt like I was distracting from their mission, or that they knew a little bit more about this is where we're going, this is what we talked about that, and she wasn't here. So anyway, I think that after talking with some other agencies, the government code says if a majority of the directors want it on the agenda, it can go on the agenda. But because we are going next to an agenda item regarding update the procedure manual. I would like to roll this into that, and then we can get some clarification, and we can talk as a board how we want our policy to read on that. Is there consensus on that, that we can address that in the next agenda item about things that we would like to deal with in our policy and procedures manual?
I'm not 100% clear on what you're getting at. So you want that to be reviewed when we redo the policy and procedures?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. And, I don't know, this is just, when you're in the minority, and Mr. Battles really helped us when we spoke with him, I felt like Mr. Battles is just like always disagreeing with me. And he explained that my job is to help the board do what their vision is legally. And you give legal advice to us, but at the direction of the majority of the board. And that helped me understand, he didn't have it out for me. I was not in the majority at that time. So I think that's an important point to make. And if by consensus, we can just discuss that and the bigger thing on our next agenda item, D. Is there consensus on that we don't take any action here?
Yeah, that can be discussed in the when we review the board policy.
Are you comfortable
I'm
with
with you
that?
guys, yeah, I have no issues with that whatsoever. Frank?
Yes. Director Mueller, do you have an opinion?
So I guess what you're suggesting is that we move into item D and then we make a decision on item C? Is that kind of what I'm hearing?
The decision on D will regard updates to our policy manual, and we discussed that at the last meeting. And so this would just be one of the items that we would seek clarification on or talk about in terms of our having a clear policy on adding things to the agenda.
Sure, no, perfect.
Okay, so with that, we're going to move to item 7D, and let us see if there's a staff report. Okay. There we go. I pulled mine out. In the staff report, you will see all of the directors, and you're already familiar with this document, Director Mueller. It's our policy and procedure. Policy and procedures, actually, it's called the purpose of board policy, or board policy, table of contents. So this is all the different policies, and this particular copy, mine is a little different. I see this is the red line copy that our attorney, Mr. Battle, spoke about at maybe the last meeting, that he had already reviewed this, and he's put some red lines in for changes. And I don't know if you had anything specifically that you wanted to address about updating.
I do have a few comments that might be helpful for me to go over before you get into your discussion at the board level. So what you have there, the red line version, reflects the changes that I made to the policy manual in 2009. I believe the draft came from SDRMA, and they wanted the district to have that policy manual in place. I think it helped with the district's insurance rates, and so it was important for the district to adopt any policy manual just to take advantage of the lower rates. And so that came into the district, and I looked at it and made various revisions, cleanup on sort of an expedited basis to get it on the next board agenda. And then for whatever reason, my changes didn't find their way into the document that the board approved. So still have that document in Word format with all the track changes. So I started with that document with my prior recommended changes, and then I made some further cleanup changes just to address ambiguities, corrections, things like that, based on a fresh review of the document. Then I also, as directed by the board last month, included the ad hoc committee's recommendations. That's a new section 22, which has got the 3 tiers for noticing, depending on the urgency of the matter, or whether it's a routine matter. So that's in a new section 22, and I tried to track very closely the document that the ad hoc committee prepared. And then at Wendy's suggestion, I also included the requirements relating to sexual harassment training. That's a new requirement since 2009. And that comes in at the end of section 20 under the requirements for ethics training. It seemed like it fit well there. I also included some requirements relating to new board member orientation. That's under section 11. And it lists some resources and encourages new directors to attend courses and that kind of thing. And then I went ahead and I revised the procedures relating to adding items to the agenda. That's section 16. The current section 16 turns out to be subject to different interpretations, and so I thought it was important to clear that up. You may or may not like the way I drafted that, but what it basically is a procedure where the full board decides what goes on the agenda for a board majority. And so the general manager, in preparing the agenda in cooperation with the board president, has the authority to put things on the agenda because often the general manager needs approval and direction from the board. And then for anyone else to put it on the agenda, whether it be the board president, a board member, or a member of the public, they make the request at a board meeting. And if the rest of the board thinks it's an appropriate topic to add to the agenda, then they approve it and it's added to the agenda. And the other board members can also determine whether staff should take it to a committee first, do some research, bring back additional materials, what's going to happen before it comes back as an agenda item. So this is similar to procedures I developed for another client where there ended up being ongoing problems with adding things to the agenda. Some board members would want something added and other board members would say we've talked about it or that's not an appropriate topic for discussion. And in order to address those types of issues, which are not so different from the issues that we might be facing here, I more or less followed those procedures. And my experience in working with those procedures over the past several years has been that they function pretty well and they avoid problems. So that's my suggestion. You're free to do something different. And what the law says is there are no specific requirements regarding the procedure you follow for putting something on the agenda, but you have to follow your own rules and regulations, whatever those may be. So the legislature leaves it up to the public agency to decide what procedures they want to follow for creating the agenda and adding items to the agenda. And then once you've adopted those procedures, you're directed to follow them. So this is an opportunity for you to really adopt any procedures that you want.
I think I've made it clear that I like having a majority, just as Mr. Higgins liked having a majority, because what can happen is if any one person can put something on the agenda, you can have an agenda loaded with a lot of distractions when you're in the middle of accomplishing something. So that's something that I learned from you, Mr. Higgins, that if you have a board vision and you're going in a certain way, to have a majority agree, otherwise somebody can keep adding things. Of course, you help me here, Mr. Battles, make the contrary argument to that. I'm thinking if anyone can add something to the agenda, be it a board member or somebody requesting from the public, maybe that's a good thing, and the board can then say, well, I don't think this is something that this doesn't fit with our current plan, so we are not going to discuss that now, but thank you.
By board majority, you can table it.
Okay, so it would take a board majority to table it, but not to get it on, so that's your safety net.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which is another way of going.
Are there any
questions? And I had a few more comments I was going to make about that. So that's what's new in there. A general comment, some of the changes I made were to address a concern that I always have, where you've got a policy manual that attempts to sort of paraphrase the law or summarize the law, because you're not going to have a complete statement of the law in there. You're not going to recite the Brown Act verbatim. And so to the extent that you're paraphrasing it, just including portions of it, you create an opportunity for conflicts or an incomplete statement of what the requirements are. And I like to avoid that wherever possible. I don't want someone to pick up the board policy manual and says, oh, this is what it says about noticing a special meeting. And it's a shorthand description of the process, because you might be overlooking important additional requirements that are also in the Brown Act that you wouldn't want to fill up the board policy manual with. So in a lot of cases where there's statements of what the law requires, I take them out because my thinking is, well, you go to the law to get the specific detailed requirements there, and the law may change, and you're not going to continually update your board policy manual to keep up with every amendment to legislation that's out there. So that's sort of a general comment to address some of the changes that you'll see in there, and that's the reason I made a number of them and took some text out. So things for you to consider with the board policy manual is, one, you might want to take more time to review it than you've had. You just got it in your board packet at the end of the week, and it's an important document, and it's a long document, and there are a lot of changes, so.
I was going to suggest that.
Yeah, I think you shouldn't rush into it.
I
You can
agree.
even have a workshop to work through it. Some agencies do that. When he made the suggestion, I think it might be helpful, and this sort of relates to the comment I just made a minute ago, to include specific code references where there's a legal requirement being discussed, and you put the cross-reference to the code so you know where to go to look for that requirement. That would take a little bit of doing, but it's not a huge project to do that. You might also want to consider, I'm not necessarily recommending this at this time, but you might consider having a more comprehensive document than just a board policy manual. It would be something like an administrative code or a municipal code that would include not just policies and procedures that affect how the board does its business, but it includes everything having to do with the district. So it might include all your current policies, procedures, rules, regulations, things like your installment payment policy, which is just a freestanding policy out there, your procedures for undertaking SYCSD review under the California Environmental Quality Act, your records retention policy, conflict of interest code. You could also include your ordinances, which have connection fees and sewer service charges and annexation fees. You've got a whole separate sewer service code, and then you've got personnel policies that are in your MOU with the Teamsters at this point. You could have a comprehensive code that had everything there, and you could also have some of the bigger items be standalone documents, but this would provide an opportunity for staff to go back and identify all the rules, policies, procedures, etc. that are out there, but that people wouldn't necessarily be aware of. And in my view, it creates sort of a permanent institutional memory, so that when you have a turnover in staff, you don't have a situation where requirements get overlooked just because the new people working at the district weren't around when the action was taken. So there is some value to that. I went through that exercise with the Glee Sanitary District and came up with a big administrative code. It's a big undertaking, but it's just something for you to consider.
I wanted to comment on it. The first a year and a half or so that I was here, on every future agenda item, employee handbook, and I know one of the first things I looked for when I was orienting myself as a newly elected person was a policy and procedure manual, and I expected there to be a policy and procedure manual for staff and then one for the board, because the board you would expect to be fluid, and employees as well, but the staff and the board are two separate things. And so that would be my concern with that. And when you say a big undertaking, I think of a big, expensive undertaking.
Yeah.
But we definitely need policy and procedures for our personnel, and I don't know, to what extent those need to be updated because of the contract and that sort of thing. But I don't know that we want to morph that almost seems like it could possibly make the board more in the dark, kind of overload.
Okay. Just a couple more comments here.
Okay.
If you want to take more time to review it, we do have sample codes that you could look at. We've got the Goleta Sanitary District Administrative Code. We've got a policy manual from CSDA, Steech Sanitary District, Vandenberg Village CSD, and Indian Valley CSD. Wendy was able to locate those. Those are just samples if you're interested in looking at what other board policy manuals look like, and that might give you ideas for changes you want to make to this one before you adopt it. In your packet, you've got a document called Rosenberg's Rules of Order.
Yes.
And it's a 6-page document, and most agencies have adopted Robert's Rules of Order. You probably have heard of those. And if they haven't adopted them, they consider themselves to be governed by Robert's Rules of Order. But if you look at Robert's Rules of Order, they're terribly complex and really not appropriate for an agency like this. The new revised 11th edition is 816 pages long, and the Robert's Rules of Order in brief is 197 pages long. The Rosenberg Rules is just, it's, like I said, 6 pages. So Robert's Rules of Order is good if you're running the British Parliament or something like that, but not really that good for a public agency like this. And it's been adopted by hundreds of local agencies.
Including ours.
And we, I didn't
Yes,
think
we did that about a year and a half ago. It was one time I got this, another time we brought in the Rosenberg and adopted that.
Okay, well, I lost
Yeah.
track of that.
Yeah.
Okay, well then, I think that, I had forgotten that when I was looking at this. So I think that it would be a change that we need to make to our board policy manual is to make it consistent with Rosenberg's rules. Because it does have a section that outlines how you make motions and all of that, which is what Rosenberg's covers. So my thought would be that we take those sections out and we attach Rosenberg's rules as an exhibit. So you've got it as part of your board policy manual, but on all those procedural details and deals with decorum and all of that, you don't want to duplicate that in your board policy manual. So we take it out of the board policy manual and default to Rosenberg's rules on that.
I believe, did you give me a laminated one after these two gentlemen were elected? Did you get a laminated procedure?
It might have been.
Yes, I
in the
think,
board orientation packet.
yes, you made an orientation packet when these two gentlemen were elected, and then I also got a copy of everything that they got.
Okay.
And that was
Yeah,
in
my
there, it's very
apologies.
helpful.
I've forgotten that we have taken
Yeah,
that
you have
action.
other agencies, it's
Not
great,
another-
and it's very
another-
helpful. I keep it by my phone and refer to it, and I'm trying to learn.
Yeah, so there's an example of a failing of institutional memory right there.
Yes.
So those are all my comments, so I just wanted to share that with you before you have your own discussion.
Well, in our discussion, you had mentioned something that when I was looking at this, I don't know if other people feel the same way, but I would like to look at this, and Mr. Director Redfern is a new director. I would like to treat this as your introduction and a draft, and then that may be something we want to talk about, having a workshop, or if we want to review this independently and come back. So, Director D'Ambra, do you have an opinion on it?
Time. Would take some time to run through this. I think we took some of the paragraphs, topics, and kind of digested them a little bit that were appropriate to what we run across on a semi-regular basis. And then reevaluate them and come back with maybe, maybe a little change, maybe something that's there we don't want to touch. I would just think we spent a couple of hours as a board informally and just kind of go over it and read it. Each of us take a part of it and read it and banter back and forth on the ingredients of it, if you will, and see if we like it, if we would support it the way it is with the upgrades. That's about all I could say. It's something you'd have to read and digest, because I read a lot of stuff and then I leave and then I wake up 3 o'clock in the morning.
It is a lot of reading, and I agree, but that's why I think that each board member either needs to read it or have a workshop. I don't think there would be an informal, it would be something that was a noticed meeting for the full board, a small workshop. Did you have something, Director Redford?
If this was a workshop, would you be leading it for us, or who, because a lot of this doesn't make a lot of sense to me by the time I read it. I'm getting lost in all the jargon. It'd be nice if someone could explain it to us in English, so we knew what each one of these things was saying, so we could apply it.
I would not want to have a workshop discussion of this without Mr. Battles present. Yeah, you would just be part of the equation, obviously, and even if it was a 2-hour workshop, something, because this has been, how long ago did you do this, in 2009?
Yes.
That is 10 years ago or more, so it's not like we're going to have to you know, rush through it, but it's
There's a
not,
lot of information here.
Yeah,
I
Did you
agree.
say,
yeah. I think we should set up a workshop,
10
set up
years
time
old.
for a workshop.
99% is still applicable, that doesn't need to be changed.
To,
Yeah.
address this.
Hang on just a second, go ahead and make your point again, Director
I think
Beard.
we should set up a time to do a workshop that we can address this in the near future.
Yeah, that appeals to me, and I don't think it has to be before the next board meeting, but soon, because we don't want, it's really easy to put things on the back burner and then other things push it further back. I'm going to go ahead and take a comment from Mr. Higgins in the audience.
I think the workshop is a great idea, but would you in that workshop, look at the different areas that you want to include in this and then pick one? Prioritize which one you think you should work on first and delve into that one. It's easier to eat something one bite at a time rather than stuff the whole thing in your mouth.
This may not be a one workshop thing. Maybe we would have
It
one
may be.
workshop where when we get together, we're like, well, I had some trouble with this. Well, I would like, you know, the agenda thing to be different. I would like the Rosenberg thing. So, yes.
I think if we have Mr. Battles leading this, he knows where the time needs to be spent on topics, which ones are important, prioritizing, if you will, and that would be in his leadership that we would follow. I would think that would be the best way to do it, since...
I'm sorry. Mr. Battles had his...
A procedure that I did follow with one agency when they were adopting a board policy manual was to put it as a standing agenda item for several agendas running. And at each meeting, they would bite off a few of the policies and they would discuss them. And on something like the agenda procedures, there may be some disagreement over how that process ought to work. And so the board members talk about it, and if there isn't a consensus, then they have an actual vote and majority wins. And so that's our policy on adding items to the agenda. And then you move on to the next issue and you talk about that. And you may go page after page and not have any issues, but that board worked through it over the course of maybe 6 meetings. And it was on the agenda for each meeting, and that was always sort of a painful, drawn-out, boring part of the meeting for everybody to go through the minutia in those procedures, but they got through it, and they ended up adopting a
I think
policy
we might be
manual at
able
the end of it.
Director Beard, go ahead.
Do a workshop to start off with, let's get through the boilerplate, the easy stuff, and then if we have something that we don't agree on, we can do that during the regular meeting.
Yeah, and you
I
can
think that's
you can have votes and you can resolve differences like that at a workshop. A workshop is an official Brown Act meeting.
Yeah.
And then we will come back when we feel like we have completed the task.
Yeah.
And it will be a priority for me to see this done in this term, in this current,
I'd like to see us at least do a workshop and get a chunk of this done, and then we can pick up the rest of it during regular board meetings where there's disagreements or where there's what we haven't gotten through. I think that's probably a better way to do it.
are there any other additional comments from the public before I see if there's a consensus to go with that, because that appeals to me as well. Does anyone have any comment from the public at this point? Done? Well, I think there is consensus to ask staff to schedule, to see what our availability is, and to try and keep it simple. And I like the small bite analogy, so we're not, spending all Saturday, locked in a room trying to get it all done.
That was gonna be my question. You said Saturday, so that's on the table then? So we can do like a 10 to 4 type of thing or something?
I am available when other people are available, and I work around, my main obligations are family things.
That
so
was
they're
just
more
gonna be one of my
flexible.
questions, if
Yeah,
that
I
was
mean,
on the table
I don't
too.
have a problem, with a Saturday, I'd prefer to do it during the week,
Okay.
As would I, that's
Yeah.
usually when my family
Well,
is
we'll ask the
around.
same thing, but that way we have
yeah. I prefer trying to do it,
5 nights in one weekend.
do it underneath, do it in an evening
Okay.
and spend a couple hours and get it done.
Director Redfern, do you have a preference as far as weekend or?
Weekdays work for me, yes.
Okay, and afternoon, evening?
Afternoon or evening works well.
Okay.
Okay, and I think so far that's been what Director Beard and Director D'Ambra have been available usually.
I'm available on weekends, but I prefer not to.
With-
Me too, that's, yeah. Okay, so I think that we don't need to take action
We'll throw
other
some
than
dates out
to.
to you guys, and Wendy will call you.
Do we have a comment?
Do we have what?
Comment?
Oh, I'm sorry. I keep forgetting the phone. Director, President Mueller, did you have any comments on doing a workshop on this?
No, I'd have jumped in if I disagreed. No, I certainly agree that we need the workshop, and, you know, of course, I've been advocating that for quite some time, but I do think maybe we should direct Wendy to caucus us and trying to determine a date for that ASAP.
Yes, I think we are all in agreement there, so good. And you will help keep us on track as far as, let's see if we can get this done between now and maybe August that would be nice.
August?
Wonderful.
I'm just throwing that, no, we're not gonna vote on that, I'm just saying, that's, 8 months away, that gives us plenty of time where we're not gonna rush and pass something and then the next board is gonna wanna come in and revise it. We want something that's gonna
Be
last.
solid.
Yes. Okay, so we can move on. Consideration, discussion and possible action on Solvang's wastewater treatment plant upgrade and financing options for the upgrade. On that, I'm gonna go to the general manager and let him explain. He has, got something to report.
Yes, thank you. Jeff Hodge, General Manager. I'll read the summary real quick and keep this very brief. All good news with it at this point. On September 18th, 2019, at the Joint Wastewater Committee, the CSD requested that Solvang include SYCSD in their bond financing as they're looking at structuring that, as opposed to going their own, and we have to pick up our 20% separately. The city agreed and will include the district. District staff also contacted the bonding company for a preliminary financial analysis. That's the exciting and good part of this. So given the district's current financial and management situation, the district has a high probability of obtaining an A rating and borrowing up to $4 million without adding district current customer base. So just to state that another way, well, two ways. One is Solvang went to a municipal bond advisor, and so they're not talking directly with the bonding people. I picked the phone right to the bonding people because I saw the Solvang meeting. Those were the questions. What might our rating really be? Once again, I use the word probably, but we have the strong board, strong management. Here's all of our. I had all that ready. We've had all of the rate studies. Have another rate study that pulled out that's 80% done, ready for any of the other options. And just ask, where are we? Are we $100,000 or where do we rate? And so that's what I just attached behind there is just a real simplistic sheet showing the 2 million option, the 3 million option, the 4 million option, and what the different payments would be and some of the current interest rates, which I think we all probably know that since this was handed to me or sent to me a couple weeks ago, those rates continue to go down. So as we move forward and need any of this, it would be a lower rate. But really, that's all we're looking at. Where do we stand? We haven't looked at this in the past. We've built those relationships. We've done all the financial stuff and then some. But to sum it up again, we can, no changes. So not adding any additional customers, only holding for 1 or 2 more years with our current rate adjustments, because we have the rate study in place, and back to the Prop 218, which is another, small master's degree onto itself, but in there, that's only good for 5 years. And then the bonding agency just put in a 2% increase over the life of these loans. So there is a 2% escalator in there as we move forward. But as we stand today, we can do $4 million, which we have that in the bank. And kind of it tags on where we're going to get in a minute, but one of the bigger things is, and probably many of our parents have told us that the bank is more than willing to loan you money when you don't need it. So we have money in the bank. That's that reassurance to them that we can make any of the payments. We have that coverage. So we have the $3 million sitting there for different reserves, in totality. We can get those later, but we have money in the bank. We have a great bonding rating, and we have the ability to go up to $4 million. So it'll be refined as we go forward, whether we need it or don't need it, but the initial prospectus here in paper and part of the record is we're sitting well. So we have flexibility, adaptability, And we can breathe a sigh of relief that we're in a good situation with whatever we choose to do or need to do in the future, so.
Question
Sir,
for you.
or through the chair.
Yes,
Oh,
yes, so
sorry.
go ahead, Director D'Ambra, that's okay.
Could they come up with the funding and put a restriction and say that the 3 million that we have in our accounts is not to be used it's in their insurance policy, almost like it's a covered loan? Could they do that? Do they do that? What is your,
Yes to all of those.
okay.
I mean, and that's where, if we move down that route, that would be something that would be discussed at that time. But the simpler answer is that yes, and that's, no, that's not on this one. But a lot of the others, they look at that number, and there's a number on there like 1.52 or something like that, and that's your coverage. So for your annual payment, multiply by that to make it simple. So there is some degree of that, to be determined. But I think the answer you're looking for is that yes, they like seeing that if everything falls apart in 6 months, the world falls apart,
Okay.
they still got 2 or 3 years of payments coming. So that then when they go out to place it, and once again, the company that I went to this is more than happy to come down in a month or two as we get closer to this and give the board more detailed insight into how that works and what the process would be. And then possibly down the way, we would want to get our own municipal advisor. And we have legal counsel, we have bond counsel, but yes, we would want some coverage of that makes everyone comfortable. So.
My takeaway from this is that, thank you, Wendy, Jeff's staff, we're in excellent shape, and it keeps our options open, and we will be an asset in working with any other agencies, Solvang. I like hearing that we are sitting pretty right now.
Yeah, now we come back to technical things, policy things, so we've got breathing room. So the other part about the upgrades is that, and I had to look it up, there's a quarterly meeting that we're going to have with Sullivan coming up in the next week or two to give an update on. I think they've moved forward with hiring a consultant to do the CEQA and some of the other preliminary engineering. So that's taking along, as far as I know, staff to staff on that, from Matt to myself. So that's the extent of that report with it. That part's functioning well.
And also, how about the aeration? Where are we at with that?
That I was going to cover under the manager's
manager?
report, because that was kind of, actually I need to touch. It's going well.
Okay,
As far as I know, it's going well. They're
Okay.
taking the lead on it. I think they're going to probably deliver a huge cost savings and a wonderful interim upgrade that, who knows, but we'll, I have great confidence they will. But yeah, that's going well. What Director Jones is referring to is on that, not December, but September 18th meeting, it was discussed that, fine bubble diffusers to upgrade the coarse bubble diffusers that are currently in the solvent plant could be done relatively easy in-house and could potentially at great cost savings because it is part of the long-term upgrade. And rather than 3 or 4 million up here, do it in-house, it could be a much lower number. So that is working really well. Back to my staff report, met with the staff and went over that and was very appreciative and thankful that they're handling it quite well moving forward with it. So I imagine we'll talk in a week or two, but that was just a week ago, 2 weeks ago, a week.
Time flies, I don't know.
Yeah, it's been very recent. So
Just
that was going really well too. And we'll talk about hopefully where that goes in the future, because I think that given the opportunity that the staff down there now, hopefully is getting turned loose and can deliver what, in my opinion, was probably option 1 of the larger report, but to be determined to see later. But that'll be back to some of the board the boards to decide and talk about later once something's deliverable.
Okay, and your
Going well.
quarterly meeting that you're having next week is you and Solvang staff?
staff
And so
level.
it's just, okay, very
Yeah.
good, and then you can report on
I
that.
green one of these, I blue one of those, and 5 more pages of that, and 3 more consultants or something, but one of those type of meetings.
Wow, we hope we keep
We're
that
working
consultant
on it.
stuff to the minimum.
Paul's got the lead with Nate.
Very good.
That's the goal.
Okay, so F, Discussion and possible action on the status of proposal to provide, oh, that is that. Sorry, that's E and F there.
Yeah,
I just
so,
covered.
yeah, F is back to their request, meaning Solvang's request to us to provide a contract proposal of what it'd take. I would say that I've been giving, other than the maintenance records and some of the other stuff, been given all there is. So we saw that unknown, and really at this point, back to the board going, you know, the easiest one and the fairest one is that, well, here's our hourly rates, and here's what, you know, we work 50% of the time or 75% of the time there, because it wouldn't be 100%, and here would be our staffing level, that's what it looked like. But that's really the easiest way to do it, because you know, it's almost impossible. I think, as Frank was saying too, you know, the plus 30 and the minus 40 this, and there's just so many permutations. Time and material is about the only way to, you know, fairly and protect our interests, say that that's what it would cost. So throw it back to the board that if you'd like me to pursue that one and say, okay, Solvang, here's a starting point. You know, we're $100 an hour, you know, loaded cost, and we think that it would be, you know, 3 operators, 25 hours a week or something. I mean, that would be a guesstimate, but at least it's a starting point, time and materials. So.
And it is a starting point, and it's keeping it simple and getting back to the transparency thing. We want everybody to understand what it is, and we can get more complicated later. Do you have anything,
I
Dr.?
kind of think there's a bigger discussion here, and with contracts in general. And I think this is something that's going to take a larger discussion, and we should, you know, possibly, I'm not sure if it is feasible to do in a closed session. For
Why?
Contract negotiation.
Contract negotiations,
Contract
definitely.
negotiation and
Yes.
contract
When it is about
discussion.
real estate, yeah.
You know, I think this is a larger discussion that we need to have.
Yeah, I'm not able to immediately identify a closed session exception that would apply to something like that.
Okay.
If we did want to discuss the contract with Solvang, would that be open or closed session? If people had specific questions about the contract that we currently have with Solvang.
I think that would be open session.
So that is something, when we have a specific direction and we know where both sides are, that's definitely a discussion that we would want to have and allow people to participate and observe our discussions.
I think this is you know, contract negotiations with them is a much larger discussion, and we need to either put it on the agenda to do that or vote to put it on the agenda to do that, because it's more than just our contract to serve them and to service the plant. It's also our contract for them taking our sewage. So there is negotiations on both parts and both ways, and we need to look into what's best for this, for the CSD.
And if I'm myself as staff, as a general manager, I have that question, because as you can kind of see, there's 2 things kind of moving in parallel.
Right.
Actually 3.
That's why
We're talking about there.
I think we
Is
need to
that
have
all?
a discussion as a whole, as
At
a board
minimum.
with both.
And I would like to have further discussion with Rick about this to further explain my concerns, that I don't want to jeopardize one or the other.
Right.
And impact our ratepayers by Solvang knowing that our direction is really this, and then that's off the table, and they've got us for, well, I just disclosed that we're good for $4 million. You know, so things like that are more of my question of the legal counsel and of the board that I'd like to.
Well, I can tell you, just based on what we've been talking about, and I also have the 2 years prior to this current term, that we were on a certain path, and it was sometimes adversarial. And right now, we are on a path where we're working very well with the city of Solvang. So it seems like that's kind of a little bit late to the, may I see this newsletter that I handed you, or did you give it back to me? One thing that you may have missed, our other board was negotiating with them, and had a relationship for, in some cases, 15 years or more with the folks who work there. And in our newsletter that we just sent out, it talks about that our previous board did that. And this is my opinion, that I think a lot of times when people have served a long time, they're really nice people, but over the years, different votes and different, whether you want to call it horse trading or compromises, after 15 years, sometimes it's hard to make much progress because you're at loggerheads. And the fact that we have a new council in Solvang and a new board here, I like to take advantage of that momentum. And I think that's really why we have been getting things done. That my first 2 years serving, it seemed like we weren't moving very well with Solvang, and without blaming anybody, it's just, when you have new people and that enthusiasm and optimism, that's strike when the iron's hot. And I would hate to throw any kind of old grudges or I wouldn't want it to start slowing down there. So I don't, since this has been recently discussed.
That's my intentions at all, or anyone's intentions, is to try to slow the process down. I think it's looking at everything as a whole, not just this portion of it or this portion of it, but looking at all the contracts, looking at everything as a whole.
Oh, well, we will get there. I'm just saying that we just sent a newsletter saying that we had just finished looking at the 3 options that were presented in our, was it $75,000 final draft? You guys weren't on the board yet, but the regional water person sent the letter talking about the 3 different options. Our board discussed different options, and our newsletter said that we had. So that, my thing is, I would like to get a little further down and get our new member fully up to speed and engaged before we start making decisions that could affect our relationship.
Well, but I think what we're asking here is that there is some of the memo, I don't know if everyone's in possession of what Rick has put together in the past about this contract and stuff. I think that's more of what I'm asking for is, and that is a confidential memo, correct, at this point with
Yeah, I've done analysis of the contract for different reasons at different times in the past, and I think for the most part, those are attorney-client communications. We did go through a process of renegotiating the contract with Solvang a number of years ago, and that ultimately sort of hit a dead end, and we didn't get a new contract.
A number of years ago, like 3 years ago or 12 years ago? Was it when you were here?
Before I was.
Oh, okay, so it's been 5 years
It was
plus.
a long process, and we identified, all of the ambiguities that we thought needed to be addressed, all of the unaddressed issues that we thought should be addressed. We prepared a draft contract that addressed most of those issues. It didn't fundamentally change the relationship. It left the existing relationship intact, and capacity percentages and all of that. It cleaned it up quite a bit and improved it, I think, for both parties, and I think could have served to avoid misunderstandings and disagreements in the future. Where we are right now, we're talking about the district potentially taking over the operation of the plant. Well, the contract we have right now says Solvang operates the plant. So if that is the new arrangement, it necessarily is going to involve some fundamental restructuring of the existing contract.
I think that's obvious and speaks to my point.
I think that'll necessarily put on the table probably, all of the issues. I think, it would be hard to do a simple amendment to the contract to address all that big change in the
That's
relationship.
what I'm getting at.
So we probably would end up
Me
with
too.
a new contract. And it would change those things that needed to be changed. Hopefully it would address ambiguities that are in the contract now and address issues that aren't currently addressed that really ought to be. So I think that opportunity will present itself as we move forward. I would hope so. It seems like it necessarily will be the way this plays out.
I completely agree with your point, Director Beard, and that's an obvious thing. There's no way, and to me, that's part of the progress we're making. But I sat here for 2 years of Jeff, sometimes it could get a little confrontational in dealing with the folks in Solvang. Like, we don't even have keys to get in there. We can't even access it. And now it's like, we'll give you keys. We want you to be a part of this. Come on in. You want to run it for us? So the further we get along in this process, obviously we're going to have to renegotiate.
Right.
Yes, and we can't use the same contract And it will be an undertaking, even probably a bigger deal than amending our policy manual. We will be going through it, and so that is one thing I think that we really need Mr. Battle's help on, is determining what part is something that is going to be a transparent negotiation and what part for the benefit of both parties to be able to negotiate privately, because I don't know. You know me, I'll talk about anything, anywhere, anytime, but there may be reasons why we want to, you know, well, we don't want to talk about that part, we need to take that and have a private discussion, so that's a legal issue.
That's my point.
I don't mind having a public negotiation at all, but if there's reason and a legal reason to do it in closed session, that's why we pay lawyers.
Right.
Yes.
Bob?
Quite candidly, I feel when you're in a closed session, I think you're a little more comfortable. My opinion, things are on the table. You're more focused, you can speak freely. That's just my opinion. In the public, you know, the more people there, there's more of a distraction, good distraction, bad distraction, be it as it may. But I personally feel when the doors are closed, you put everything on the table, you take off the gloves, and you get right to the meat and potatoes, just my opinion. So I like that. I could go either way, no problem, but...
That dang transparency. You know, it's really good when you're announcing all the cool stuff you're doing, but when you want to get down and really fight, boy, you want to close that door. So, I mean, sometimes I agree. It's a lot easier to get stuff done when people aren't watching and wanting to put their 2 cents in, but that's a Brown Act issue, and I don't know to what extent that we negotiate, yes, in public.
Yeah, and I can do further analysis again on the face of it. It's not, there aren't readily available Brown Act exceptions for holding a closed session for contract negotiations. I think there is for real estate negotiations, but not generally for contract negotiations. So you have, you know, personnel matters, labor negotiations, real estate negotiations, litigation, things like that, but contract negotiations isn't one of them that I've routinely use. So I mean, we could do some digging. I think there are other ways to handle it. You can have an ad hoc committee from this board negotiate with an ad hoc committee from Solvang, and then bring back to the board proposals in open session for the board to make open and public decisions on. Right. So there can be, you know, at a staff level, at a committee level, there can be negotiations in closed meetings that aren't, you know, where the public doesn't attend. But it is a little tricky, you know, and you know, there is. We'll have to figure out exactly how it's going to work.
Well, I've been on the other side of that.
Part of it. That's one of the reasons for me bringing it up is how is this going to work and how
And
well, just a second, I want to say that as a member of the public that has been on the other side of people having non-public ad hoc meetings and making a big decision that was going to affect me as a person who lived here, I didn't like it. And I thought, we're all in this together, let's talk. And I have seen open ad hoc committees where they're noticed and people can go and do well, you know, where they're trying to work out some kind of a memorandum of understanding. And when it's closed, I as a citizen didn't like it. But sometimes, once again, when you've been on a board, just even these first 2 years, I've learned a lot about, I would say that some of the things that maybe we had complaints about the lack of transparency were like, oh, well, you can get a lot done if you don't have the pesky public bothering you. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, that's just the reality of it. Is there any comment? Oh, you had a comment.
Well, yeah, back to the memos that he's prepared and stuff, and you know how that's where how do I communicate that with you? I mean, I'm sitting on some different directions that I need policy with, and obviously I'm having this discussion because I don't feel that it's in the best interest in the people that I serve to throw that on the table and let everybody know that I have 2 aces and kings. You know, it's just. I need some direction from the board on what I feel will be, well, either potential future litigation. And once again, I will say that to me, litigation is not a bad, I mean, it's the administrative thing. So we can't work through it, you know, administratively. It's not a bad thing to go and sue people and talk about that. But they could lead to potential litigation to have a judge work this out. But then somewhere along the lines, yes, we have, you know, a contract, and I I feel I need that direction without showing all the cards that we hold.
Well, what's not working right now? Like, you need to upgrade the contract before we
Well,
even
you see,
know
that's
what
kind of why I'm
we're
not
doing?
gonna have that conversation right now in front of everybody. You know, that would be exactly.
Well, see, I'm in the dark and I'm the chairman of the board representing the public, so if there are things that I don't know, maybe we should talk more. Is there something confidential that you feel like you need direction, you need some kind of legal advice before you talk to me?
Well, I need 3 members to give some of that direction. I mean, so it's one of those, if I throw it out there, well, then you can throw up that roadblock, and that's
Okay.
no longer a path to pursue, shall we say.
So you're looking for a motion to ask?
No, I throw it out there so legal counsel can hear that too. And I was just trying to start with something that, you know, Frank has never seen that memo that he's prepared, or the memos in regards to his contract. You know, I think it's quite critical, and if he can just send you all out the memos, and if you can talk to him individually, I don't know. I
Well,
need
that's
that
kind of hub
direction.
and spoke-ish though, if we're doing that, I'm not comfortable with that. And Mr. Redfern, this is his first night here, he's got maybe 4 or 5 meetings under his belt with this group as a member of the audience, which is different than being in a position of voting. But I don't really, I guess I'm feeling like, is there something going on that I don't know about?
I think maybe Jeff and I need to identify exactly the information that you're concerned about, and then discuss a
Yeah, I mean,
path forward for.
And we've had those ongoing
Yeah.
ones with this, the contract.
Yeah.
And we've had some of those, and so I guess that's my question. Can I send it to the board members? Well, you need to send it to the board members. Can you send it to our new board members so they can read it and understand it? But then we get into like what we had earlier, you know, reading and understanding it. It's not decipherable necessarily for the layperson. I mean, so how do we have that next level? Can they contact you directly and get a little more? Because I know that.
Informational stuff, right? If we need additional information, that is completely legal.
Well, it depends on how the conversation goes. If I have a conversation with more than a quorum of the board, and I'm sharing information, that's part of a process where
Yes.
the board is developing a position, or a consensus is being developed or something, and I'm sort of a hub with spokes going out. to
Yes,
each board
that's what I was
member,
worried
and
about.
That potentially could be a violation, and I think what Jeff is talking about is the analysis I've done of the existing Solvang contract, you know, to the extent that it involves, you know, legal interpretations, opinions, and all of that. We want to keep it as a privileged, confidential attorney-client communication.
And that is protected.
And so, you know, that can be discussed in a closed session, but as we've discussed, we probably can't have a closed session for contract negotiations. And so how do we discuss those information in that issue? I would say, you know, as of tonight and maybe going forward, those issues may not be important in a contract renegotiation. If we're entering into a new contract or a significantly revised contract with Solvang, then my analysis of the old contract becomes somewhat irrelevant.
Right.
If, you know, we're talking about if we need to determine tonight or at a future meeting what our rights and obligations are under our existing contract, then I think that issue is on the table. You know, to what extent can I share with the board all of my opinions in that regard, and how informed does the board need to be? But I don't know that we've got that issue yet, where the board needs to be involved, needs to be advised regarding its rights and obligations under the contract, for purposes of, you know, going forward with what we're talking about tonight on.
Just
Right.
hang on just a second, because I want to speak to that. Our contract is public.
Correct.
So if we are going to discuss a public contract, and I understand what you're saying about certain, you may have privileged information that we as a board don't know or shouldn't be talking about for some reason that I am not aware of. But I like having public discussions about public agreements that we are going to make with our friends and our neighbors that affect our life here in the valley. So I will have to, you can do the research that you need to do, but I'm a big fan of having negotiations in the public, because it kind of gets back to what we were talking about, transparency. We were elected because we think people did something in a back room and then announced this is how it's going to be. So I'm on the fan of avoiding any hub and spoke stuff, avoiding any, I think that it should be in public. And then we can all be held accountable for what we bring to the table. Excuse me, are there comments from the public? Yes.
I hate to weigh in on this, but it's all.
We need somebody to weigh in because we sound a little bit like we're spinning our wheels.
I pay a sewer bill in San Ynez, and I pay a sewer bill in Solomon. Spoken Hub. My interpretation of the Brown Act, and I'm hard over on this, and that is you can do Spoken Hub anytime you want. That means that each and every individual here can talk about a subject on an agenda or on a future agenda. There's only one thing you can't do. You cannot tell the other person what your preference is, which way you want to vote, why you think that's the proper way to vote on the subject. Brown Act, no violation. And that's been hard and fast and presented many times in Salt Lake City Council meetings. And the new members know exactly what that means. Now, if you go and have more than 2 people in a meeting, okay, and you discuss and you come up with a direction, and everybody knows what that direction is going to be, the way you're going to vote, then you have a Brown Act violation. So that's what I firmly believe.
Well, that makes sense, and most of my information comes from reading. I did an online ethics training as required by law, and I talk to people, but because Bob and I are on the wastewater committee, I do express my opinion and direction on which way I'm leaning to him, but I don't with other people. Now, if I was on a different committee with Director Beard or Director Redfern, then I would be saying my opinion to them. So I think that's helpful, but I tend to agree with you, but you have more experience than I do on this. I believe you do. And I think that we should all be able to ask questions of our staff and be fully informed because we're going to be making the decision. I think that we need to be informed.
Your opinion of that?
There may be some gray areas, but it's not as black and white that you can discuss anything you want so long as there's no concurrence developed. The Brown Act, and I'm looking for the specific language here, requires that you have a posted agenda if you're going to discuss or take action on an item. And
If a majority is, or if 2 people
Yeah,
are?
a majority, more than a quorum discusses or
Yes.
takes action on it, because the discussion is part of the process of developing a collective concurrence. And, one thing you clearly can't do is disclose the position of another director, that's clear. But if if a majority of the directors are discussing district business, one time or on an ongoing basis outside of a meeting, outside the public's ability to view it, then that it can be a Brown Act violation. And then and that's where you've got directors talking to each other, and where it gets a little bit, where you find gray areas is where you've got an intermediary, like a hub and spoke. You can have a CRO meter where Director A talks to Director B, talks to Director C, and in that way, and they're conveying what the other director said, even if they're not saying how the other director is going to vote, or they're not going to that. There's still a serial meeting because there's that discussion among all the directors. The hub and spoke is where you've got one person like the attorney talking to each director, and if the attorney is very careful to limit what he says about what the other directors say, then you may be in an area where you're safe. Or the same thing with staff. The staff can give a briefing to the director so long as the staff there's no development of a collective concurrence, and you're not sharing positions. A one-way communication like that.
Well, in talking to you or general manager,
Yeah.
you would not need to say, well, that's interesting, Karen, here's what Bob's take, or what, you know, I can't even envision that
Yeah.
with, you know,
Yeah.
I certainly cannot.
So there, you know,
With
there
you.
are some options, there are some gray areas, and, you know, those are things that maybe Jeff and I can talk about next.
Yeah, because it's not immediate. I mean, we've got a month or two before we get to more of a fork in the road type of thing, where we're gonna need that, so.
Yeah, probably at least,
I
and
can
that's
bring
when we
that
can
up,
do
but-
it. We don't need to borrow any trouble or invite any problems. This is a natural process that when we get there, we shall deal with it. Yeah. Okay, so we can, is there anything else on that? I think, you know,
We've got one board member on the phone.
oh, Director Mueller, he told me earlier, thank you, he told me earlier that if he had anything he wanted to say, that he would speak up. Okay.
That's correct.
Yes. Okay. So we move to G, which is discussion and developing criteria for pursuing sewer line extensions and funding.
Okay, yeah, you'd asked me to put this on the agenda, you know, Bob's brought this up a couple times. Due to the stricter state and county regulations on, am I on the right one? Yeah, 7G. On septic systems, the district has had a significant increase in residents needing and wanting sewer. The district mission is to respond to the needs of the citizens and provide them with sewer while protecting the district's financial position. The board may want to work towards developing a plan that addresses providing sewer lines to residents within annex areas, sphere of influence, out of agency requests, while maintaining the current fiscal position, or excuse me, financial position, and having the residents pay their proportionate share of the sewer line extension. That's a place to start. I know this has come up. I interjected earlier when we were talking about where we sit with bonding. That's a board policy decision. You know, where we're at now, the things have changed and everything, back to what we alluded to here. Yes, it's nicer to have the money in the bank. We have the ability to borrow it. We have the 218 that sits out there too. And I know that comes up with some of this, and it's more into a loan. But I think the ultimate thing is those citizens pay that back. And you know, my take though is looking at that horizon. You see on the other that it's, you know, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years. 20 years is the, as you probably all know, 20 years is, especially no more money than we're talking. The reason that 20 years is the best is that that's what most, you know, under 32 million in there is what most banks can loan. So we can get I don't want to confuse well the word, but we can go to a different source and get the 20-year financing, as opposed to when you go 30 or 40, it takes a little more of the reserves. But it's coming up with how do you want to serve the customers that need the service that we provide.
Man.
Yes, please.
Horizon is probably, it's front and center. It's been a problem. The problem isn't septic, the problem is a high water table on Horizon. That's the disease. This failure of the septic is the symptom. It's the 4 foot, they were here saying 4 foot they were hitting the water table. If we have a protocol, a policy, a mnemonic, if you will, on where we extend the lines in relation to hookups, whose Horizon, you know, I believe if I'm close, if I'm not accurate, there was 21 properties there, 17 were interested, but 3 were ready to put their money on the table. My concern is, for 3 people, we will spend $750,000, okay? If we have a protocol that we follow, we can, let's say we did it at the stadium, and they picked up 3, and there's another 750,000. So we got 6 at $1.5 million of out-of-pocket costs. And if, let's say we picked up another street, we pick up 5 out of 30, that puts us at $2.1 million, and we have 15 properties that are actually repaying that. That's a lot of money that we're losing in interest, and over the long term, yes, we'll get it back, but we lose substantially. You never get it back, I think, if you mathematically calculate it out. I understand this is a service we provide, but I think if we can provide it in a way that we have a minimum, either by street, X amount of properties per street have to sign on for us to extend that, or we just need some kind of formula. I don't know what that is, but I think it's imperative for the long term. Otherwise, we could spend all our money and get 15 or 20 properties hooked up, and then all of a sudden somebody comes up and says, well, we've got a whole street that wants to go and we have no more funding, and now we're going into debt, borrowing money to support something that those properties are willing to hook up, as opposed to if we would kind of fine-tuned our ability to get those properties, fine-tune them in a way that we had 25%, let's say, or 12%. I don't know what that is. But I think we need to come up with a number of properties per street, or a number in relation to what we will expend to put out the laterals to get back. We're gonna spend $1 million for 2. Would you, if that was your money, would you do that? I sure wouldn't. I don't think any of our community would want us to do that. But we are responsible, and we do want to respond and help everybody we can. But I think mathematically, we need to have a formula that works, that protects us and gives the service that we need to the community. And it may be in cases where they're going to have to step up if they want it, you know. Maybe we'll have meetings and put it all on the table. I don't know what it is, but I know that if we don't do that, I could see the shotgun effect. And pretty soon, you know, you got 2 streets with 2 and 2 streets with 6, and we're out of money. So my concern is that we have a formula that we follow to get people involved to hook up before we go spending millions of dollars and we have 2 people on the street. I find that could be dangerous financially.
Well, but really it's a policy issue. You need to go back to what you're saying with the underlying thing. I mean, do you want to just not serve them and let them go with the Advantech system? Then you need to do that and tell staff, because we're in that with everything going on, you know, and the timeline of everything you guys have lived through and where we're at. We are now seeing, you know, that's the reason that the West San Ynez was annexed, because now those septic systems are failing. They're calling, you know, Jason Johnson at Environmental Health Services. He's calling us going, your line's over here. These people, you know, and people are seeing now that, you know, there's a $40,000 or $50,000 Vantech system, or if we were there, back to your thing, you know, on average that runs probably $25,000 if we could get everybody out there. You know, so there's a delta there in that change. You know, so it's just what you're saying. What's that formula? And the thing is that they're dropping like flies, because we don't even hear about the ones. They don't call us on, you know, the ones in your neighborhood or anything, because they're far enough away. They know there are no lines in Skyline. You know, so they don't even bother calling us. So I don't have an idea if there's a need.
What Bob is asking for is, you know, maybe put it in a little simpler terms, as we have to sort of go street by street and say, what's our break-even point? Is it 4 homes, 25%, 7 homes? You know, I mean, what's our break-even point that we can justify spending the money, even though in the future we'll probably have people hook up?
And you know,
and it may be on a street by street basis.
And it is, and there's those other parts that are changing. That when what we're talking about originally came about, there's still that, well, EHS wasn't enforcing yet. So what you're talking about, everyone, and we're still hearing it. Well, I haven't pumped my septic tank in 20 years. It's great. We love septic tanks. They're wonderful. Well, Environmental Health Services disagrees with that.
Right.
You know, and given their bureaucracy, they much rather see it go away, because they're going to have to monitor all those individual systems, not us. And so they want to hook it up to that. So what you're talking about there, that delta, and with what you're seeing, it's really changed. You know, it's a time issue really now. You know, we're losing the customers that, they're not going to want to hook up because they are having to put these in their backyard. Right. You know, so we would just be kicking the can down the road, because, you know, I'm editorializing there, but we'll have the problem again in 10 years or so. So really 50% would be fine. You know, but it's getting out there and getting it done now. Because, and it hints back to what I'm saying. Yeah, we should use our money. That was just that little
Right.
to
but
get
is
this
it-
project going.
Is it acceptable
Just-
or,
I'm sorry, I just wanted to make the comment that this is something that would benefit from transparency, a public meeting to let people in the community be interested, and our board have this discussion in a specific meeting to deal with that formula, notice people, and we would all have input, and I know that you have, everybody's got something to bring to the table. I appreciate your financial expertise, and you guys know the area. I think we would be able to come up with a formula to direct staff, because it is for sure that times change, laws change, it's getting close to where we need to make some real decisions here. And also innovation, that's the neat thing in the background of all this. So, we need to make choices. It's not, well, we're gonna serve them or we're not. I think we can find something between us all that is reasonable for all involved. So that's the direction I would like to take. I like having something specific, that this is the criteria and this is what needs to happen, so we can give specifics.
Yes, the numbers I agree with, the 50 would be great. The other thing, back to what you're asking, is that, that needs to be environmental health services sitting here explaining to people what their criteria is to fail septic tanks. Because there's still that denial that, hey, I've had it in the ground for 30 years, it's gonna be fine, I won't call anybody. That's just not happening anymore. They're enforcing.
Well,
I actually think, to be honest with you, 50% is probably too high of a number.
I would say that's,
excuse
that'd be great.
me, let me have some clarification. 50% are
Financial.
not,
Okay.
I see, I didn't know what you
Yeah,
meant.
50%
Okay.
of, no, what I'm saying is, there's 10 people on the street, 5 people have to hook up. I think that would be 50%. It depends on the financial of it is, and yes, at the beginning, we may not actually be breaking even, but if we can project that, we're gonna have hookups in the next 5 years,
Could
would it
take an
still be
average.
worth it and take an average and look at it at that? Because if we look at saying, oh, we're not gonna put a line down the street unless we get 50% people compliance, it'll never happen.
I agree.
I think you have to look at one other thing too, and that is, how useful is that line going to be
In
to
the future.
extending to other
Right.
homes later down the road?
Right.
That's a good consideration.
So maybe you only do get 3, but that opens up, another 15, 20 homes down the street later.
Yeah.
You know,
If I could, you need
Very
to, on our website, we have environmental health services, because a couple years ago when this issue was coming up, went to environmental health services and said, we've studied this to death. I need money to figure out where the lines are gonna go. So we pretty much have that. It's tweaked a little bit into some other things that have come up, but we have that. You can get it on our website. And I can get you, wouldn't even get you a hard copy. But yeah, that's already in place.
The
And that's why I
website is
like
great,
it.
Jeff, but
Same
I know
thing
that
with
I'm probably, for a baby boomer on a scale of 1 to 4 of being able to navigate the internet, I'm probably average or above. And I have trouble even finding packets from a certain year. There's a lot of information on that website. And I think it would behoove us, getting back to having a meeting, talking about financials, and including environmental health services, including if our supervisor wants to send staff. Let's get everybody in a room and talk about this stuff and see how we can move forward. Because I agree, we don't want to make a number where it is just kicking a can down the road, but people need actual information, and we can't just send them to the website. And I know I personally would learn a lot more if I could directly question. Even if all the information's up there, I like to have Wendy say, oh, show me where that is and how do I read this? So that would be a really helpful thing to find out where we are and have people who can answer the questions.
So, but yeah, Bob, fundamentally, totally agree with you. And as you heard today, money, we're not gonna make it back. We need to keep that there.
Yes.
It's just landing on that number, because you saw the room the other night, it's starting to pick up that momentum, and one neighbor talks to the other neighbor, it's spreading like that in some of our other outlying areas.
Sienna? That was
Sienna?
for,
We went from 1 to
5?
Yeah,
yeah, I would just, I think it'll build up its own stride, but I think we need to have that number as a minimum, a safety net. And it certainly would be reasonable, very reasonable, but I feel that could be financially a disaster or it could be a financial savings. If we do it correctly, it would allow us to go out there and do more extension, if we do it.
Yeah, you have the financial capabilities, as I
No, and
pointed out earlier.
I think it's a very important discussion. I appreciate this being on the agenda because I also think of who can we serve in the future, because that makes it make more sense than let's shoot a line here and shoot a line there. You think, why can't you put a line under the pavement up Refugio and get both sides? Or, I mean, I don't need you to answer that now. I'm saying those are the kind of questions.
6-inch gas.
But on the side, but those are the questions people would have and want to know, you're telling us that this and this is the best way to go, and it would help that you say they're in denial. That would be a great way to give people more information to work with.
And now that they have Jason Johnson that's in there, the other guys have retired, and they've got a new member, he's been in there maybe 6 months, that I will reach out to him and see if him and Larry, or Larry would let him come, and we would put that on an agenda, or maybe you would or back to your priorities stuff that you fought. I mean, is this at 1, 2, or 3, or have him commit those memory, but, is it time to shoot a letter out to everybody and say,
I think that's premature. I think we need to have an idea of what we want as a number per $100,000 we spend, per million, per 750. We need to have that to present to the people before we present it to them, because then it would look like we don't know.
well, but please, it's back to, you're gonna have the same thing you've seen all the time in the past, some of you guys have asked, how much does it cost?
Yes.
And we get in this doggone circular argument that.
Well, that's why I would like, the suggestion of an ad hoc committee. This might be a good one for 2 people to be able to discuss, and you don't necessarily, have to get too fancy about it, but if we have 2 people that could come back to the board and present their ideas I know, if there are 2 people at this table, that might be a good way to go, and then you can discuss it, whoever the 2 people who you think it should be, and then bring it to the board, because I am open to that formula. I think it's a good idea to know.
I don't have a problem being on an ad hoc committee for that.
I think you would be an asset, and I know, Mr. Redfern, would you be willing to work just around your schedule? It doesn't mean it's another workshop thing, but would you and David, or Director Beard, be able to work together? I think that you would complement each other in background and be able to bring something to us that would be a really good starting point. Are you comfortable with that?
I'm very comfortable with that we just, we'll come up, whatever we come up with is great. It's something we don't have, and it's in the direction we need to go to find out financially, this will work, we can make it work. You brought up a great comment about, maybe get 3 here, but it opens up, a dozen down the road. So, I think it gives us a comprehensive idea of how we can protect our finances and provide the best quality service on sewer line extension. That's what I would like to, I don't like the idea we just put it out there and figure, well, in 20 years we'll get our money back. In 20 years you'll probably be rebuilding it, and maybe there'll be 3 more on it. I think we're in the right direction. I totally support that, and the ball's in your court, gentlemen.
I never thought phones would look like this 20 years ago. I mean, a lot can happen in 20 years, and that's why we need to be prudent financially and not overinvest in something that doesn't make sense.
So Karen, you're well every day.
It's all spilled out.
Motion ad hoc.
Thank you. Yes, do we need to, is this a consensus item, or do we need a motion?
To form a committee,
Okay.
committee needs to form a board action.
Is there a motion to form an ad hoc committee to address how we are going to pay for future, am I wording it correctly, future installation? Does that cover it?
And develop policy regarding that, or
Yes.
recommendations?
A recommendation for a policy.
And the timing's kind of nice, since we're updating our policy manual, so.
I'll make the motion that we form an ad hoc committee to look at the potential extension costs and coming back with a formula, some input.
policy.
A policy, procedure, recommendation, however you want to put it.
We'll call it a policy, does that work?
Recommendation, I would say.
Recommendation on policy.
Policy legally is something you follow, but you're not legally bound to, is that about right?
Correct.
Policy's fine.
So it would be a recommendation for a policy. They
A
would
recommendation
obviously
for a
adopt a policy on their own. And the motion should also identify who the members of the committee will be.
Yes. Director Mueller, I know that you will speak up if you have an opinion here, but are you comfortable with that?
Yeah, and I'll second it.
Oh, nice. The electronic thing's working. We have a motion and a second.
Okay, so we have a motion by Director Deambra, a second by Director Mueller to, well, you need to pick who's gonna be on there. Is it Frank and,
Director Redfern and Director Beard.
all right, to form an ad hoc committee with Director Beard and Director Redfern to address how to pay for future installations and recommendations for a policy,
Yes,
right?
yes.
Okay, we'll do a roll call vote. Director Redfern,
Aye.
Director Beard,
Aye.
Director Jones,
Aye.
Director Deambra,
Aye.
Director Mueller.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Very good. Okay, now we're on to informational items, and we will start with Wendy and the treasurer's report.
All right, so for the finances for the quarter ending September 30th, 2019, our Rabobank checking had $12,614 in it. Rabobank Money Market had $567,740. LIIF had $158,403. 5 Star has $2,790,489. Our CDs have $316,680 with a total of $3,145,927. We earn 2.3% quarterly in LAIF. We earn 2.3 in the 5 Star. And our CDs mature on May 20th, May of 2020, and January of 2020.
Okay, and did Rabobank change its name?
Yes. You can make it.
Mechanics. Okay.
You know what a mechanic is, don't you?
Yes.
A guy who fixes your car.
With a gun.
Yeah. Okay, and is that it for you, Wendy? Okay, then we will move on to SDRMA President Special Acknowledgement Award, Property Liability Program.
So that's just an informational item saying that SDRMA has given us an acknowledgement for no claims for our property liability program, and with that, that just reduces, you earn incentive points to be claim-free, and then you get a reduction on your annual bill. So
I have a
that's
good
just
driver discount, yes.
And then with the next one is for Hal Moore and Goff. They're the legal firm that we're
Mr.
responsible
Bowers,
for.
yes.
And every year he does an analysis on his rates, and he's chose not to raise his rates this year again.
Very nice, yes, thank you.
And that's it.
Okay, then we shall go to 9 reports, and we'll start with Jeff and the manager's report.
Thank you. First one is, as usual, in the first item is always the flows. We were a month or two behind, so they're all in here. Been doing it for the last 5 years or so. Show you what our flows are, what solving flows are. You can see peak flows and stuff. Just a monthly reminder and part of the record, so we keep track of that as we plan forward with everything. The solving plan upgrade, talked about that earlier. The Horizon. Horizon's moving along well. Only for the main point is that San Dakota has extended the line that will service all that. It's now either all the way out of the right of way, or we just need to put in a manhole, a few more feet of pipe. But basically, it's out of the manhole in their driveway, and then it will be able to once we enter into other negotiations and discussions, head north with that. But it is now in the county's jurisdiction, which puts it back into our jurisdiction, not Caltrans, so that's huge. That's what, the couple properties that we have entered into out-of-service agreements with, Jan Acres, Caltrans is like, no, we only deal with public agencies, you'll have one line coming out, so to be continued with that. But that's critical, and that ties in with Horizon, and back to some of the things we were talking about with timing, cost, and construction methods. We're now looking at low pressure pump systems. Cutting, and especially back to some of the other questions, the line currently is like really deep, and there's not big backhoes around here like there are other places. So, you get down to 15, 20 foot, most backhoes, that's about the extent of it, is 14, 15 foot. You're at the bottom of the ditch. And so our line's much deeper than that. So that escalates the cost. We're looking at a way that we meet them in between. It becomes ours, but everybody has their low pressure system. They have their own self-contained 3 foot by 6 foot deep with a pump in it. It then pumps out to a common line that has a backflow so everybody can pump into it different times. It moves it all down until it hits the gravity. You can put it in shallower. Ours would be a minimum depth of 4 feet. You're talking much smaller pipe. You can either open trench it like we all see with the ditch witch, where they have, the chainsaw looking thing on there where it digs through there. And it's small enough, and even if we've done with bigger pipes, and actually still on this line extending up there, looking at doing this with the HD&P, the directional boring, but doing the same thing with the smaller 2-inch. That way you're not tearing everything up. You set here, you push it that way. I don't know how far you can push the little stuff. The big stuff, I think I've told you that one of the water turnouts that I've done was like 7,000 foot or so. So you can go a long ways with, with this stuff, depending on the technology. But that gets it in there, cuts the cost, and gives people the sewer service they need. Back to power outages, it has enough hold time in there for 3 or 4 days, so that's taken care of. So exciting with that. We, meaning staff and stuff, arrived at this on our own, then started looking around. Carpinteria, they've put it down. So when you drive down the 101, Rincon, the Santa Claus Lane, some of those areas, they've used the same technology. After the fact, we did our research, came up with that, contacted them. They're like, well, hey, just down the street, these guys have been using. So there's some of the applications within an area that we can see and look at. So anyway, that's pretty exciting, because back to the cost and payback and stuff, that's the biggest thing. And back to that, we're coming at this 50 years after the fact. Usually in a normal subdevelopment, you put in the sewer first and start stacking everything on top of it. Well, all of this has been urbanized years ago, and there was no provision for sewer, so now we're coming back. So anyway, looking at that to serve that, that's kind of exciting. I sit before you as the new president come 2020 for Special Districts of California, representing over 1,200 of them. So next year will be my opportunity to shape and direct that organization on policy, legislative issues, and the likes.
Congratulations.
Thank you all for that support. So, and with that, back to, I saw it kind of came up on some of the other stuff with the newer board members, the Leadership Academy. This has come up with some of the others. The Leadership Academy used to be 4 individual modules. Now they do it all in one location. Talks about financing, talks about board GM relationship, talks about the Brown Act, and it's a way to get in and out of there in 2 days and give you that primer for everything we're dealing with here. So you have all the books and stuff you see in front of you, which we gave to everybody and we give to Frank, and that's that start. But back to like what Karen was saying, it gives the opportunity to stand there rather than a webinar or something and actually ask this person a question. Then, well, wait a second, what's this mean, and how does this work out for a closed session like that, and how do you really find this? So anyway, really encourage that. I put in the date for San Diego. I think there's some other ones up north, and I can apprise you of those as they come forward. And special district meeting in Goleta on
28?
Yeah, the 28th. It's going to be a tour of theirs. I wasn't able to attend their open houses last weekend. It's another year that they've done the Jurassic Park one. Those of you that watch the news in the morning have probably seen their manager, Steve, several times for the banking commercials and stuff. But they got a great operation. They're moving forward some different reuse stuff. Nice facility. and anyway, opportunity, anyone interested, let Wendy know, we'll RSVP, and away we'll go on whatever arrangements to get us there on Monday. And with that, any questions of me? Otherwise, I'm good to go.
Congratulations.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah,
Thank you all for your support.
Okay, well, with that, tentative agenda items.
Oh, you still got it.
Oh, excuse me, we still have a legal counsel report. I
Almost.
thought that was really
The
it.
most important item on the agenda.
No, I was excited because I thought Jeff, when he said he was done, that we were done. I was ready to.
Just quickly, a recent CEQA case, California Environmental Quality Act, dealing with what's required in your project description. What CEQA states is that your project has to be described in terms that are accurate, stable, and finite. And there's a group called millenniumhollywood.com versus City of Los Angeles. And that group sued the city because it approved a project that was based on an EIR that the court, that had what was alleged to be an inadequate project description. The project analyzed the impacts of the project based on an illustrative scenario for a potential development program that would implement certain land use and development standards, but it provided the developers with flexibility regarding the final arrangement and density of specific land uses, siting, and massing characteristics. So it really didn't describe the siting, the size, the mass, the appearance of any building. It gave the developer a lot of discretion regarding what the ultimate project would look like within these fairly broad parameters. And so the court held that it wasn't an adequate project description under CEQA because it failed to adequately describe what the project was really going to look like. And the rationale for the court's holding was that if you have a description of a broad range of possible projects rather than an actual project or maybe a preferred alternative within a range of alternatives, then that presents the public with a moving target, and anybody submitting comments would have to offer input on a wide range of alternatives that maybe don't even ever get approved. And so it puts an unreasonable burden on the public if you don't really nail down the project in advance. So you can have alternatives. And in another case that came down recently, there were a couple of alternatives. One was for residential development, and the other involved commercial and office. But it was essentially the same building footprint, the same mass, same square footage, and the environmental impacts, were going to be the same. In the case where the project description was found to be inadequate, the developer thought that they were covering it because they analyzed sort of worst case impacts from any of the scenarios. And so they said, we've analyzed all the impacts. This is, there's a full analysis of every different alternative that might result. But again, the court thought that was a moving target, and it just put too much of a burden on anybody who wanted to submit comments because they comment on this one and all those environmental impacts and that one and those environmental impacts. So that was the case. So, it probably doesn't come up in the kinds of projects that we're involved with, but if we wanted to go in for an approval, or if we had a project that was broadly defined to give us some discretion to put the pipeline here versus there, we'd have to be careful to comply with this decision, and we'd have to make sure that our description was accurate, stable, and finite. It didn't give us too many options.
Thank you. I think it's a trend. I think we will, the millennials are, there won't be baby boomers and the judges, and it just changes. So that's good to know. That is something to consider. Okay, so Secretary, Treasurer report.
All right, all I have is ethic and sexual harassment trainings. Director Jones, your ethics is up on November of this month, or this year. And then Director D'Ambra and Beard, you guys are good to go for several years. And then Frank, we need to set up so you can take the ethics and the sexual harassment training.
Did you say several years?
These two, yeah, because they just did theirs.
It's not every 2 years?
It's every 2 years.
Oh, okay,
They
They
have,
have 18 months. or
they
so.
have lots of time.
okay, well, and it can be any ethics training, or is it sexual harassment?
It has
There
to
are
be.
two different.
Right, okay. I won't even say
So,
when that law went into
If,
effect. It's
you can
present.
take it online from your computer if you guys want. Or we can set it up and you can come in here and do it together.
Whatever works. I mean, how do you like to learn?
I probably have the same computer skills you do, so.
Does that mean you would prefer to do it on computer or
If you can set it up so it's easy, I'm all about easy.
I like that too.
CSDA will email you a link and you just log in. So you'll have to set up your login information ahead of time and then they'll send you a link and then you just click on it and it plays. And then
Well, and then the last time I did the sexual harassment training was a couple of years ago, pre-meeting, and did we watch a video or what? Yeah, I mean, if, we can also do that. And it's easy to do the link once you get logged in and everything's going, but, we'll talk to you about it. We'll talk and we'll figure out a way, and we'll both get ours done at the same time. I didn't realize I was down to the last 30 days. Okay. And so are you done with that? And so we move on to committee reports, and do we have any committee reports?
I don't.
Yeah, we finished with the ad hoc with Director Mueller. Okay, so then we shall go on to tentative agenda items. And on that right now, we have the Horizon financing, which I think we covered in our new ad hoc. Solvang wastewater treatment plant upgrade, that's gonna be ongoing. Sewer code that's just kind of always on there, so is that just an ongoing one that we leave on there?
Well, and you kind of touched on that when Rick was talking about the workshops and incorporating some of that in there, maybe possibly going to comprehensive, but yeah.
Okay, but that's something we'll
It's just
talk.
time and money. You know, there's half a dozen things that probably need to be, and especially now that we're constructing stuff that probably need to be in there. So staff will review that and see when we can get back with you on that. But some of the detail that by practice we've used at the district isn't necessarily reflected in the code. But the code gives me the discretion to specify certain things, but there's just that gray area. You want the contractors want to argue with you that, well, it doesn't say it in there. And you have to refer to the, well, page whatever it says that I say, no, you put in the manhole that doesn't have any concrete in type of thing. So
And
I'll
that's
look
the
into that and
same,
see what that might cost and the time on that.
the design specifications, is that the similar
Yeah, that's
kind
more
of
what
thing?
I'm covering, yeah, thanks.
Okay, and then do we need the revised water softener ordinance on there?
I think we pretty much beat that horse out of the
Well, we got a letter from Solvang some long time ago saying that your water softener ordinance needs to be consistent with our ordinance, which is the case. And so I looked at our water softener ordinance and it's pretty similar. So I think we need to communicate back to Solvang in some fashion to respond to their letter.
I believe we did that, didn't we? No? Because we
I don't
got
think
a
we have to send a
follow-up.
letter.
No, I sent an email, I sent a proposed response for you to look at, but we need to talk about that, I guess.
Okay.
I'm not sure.
We had some
That's
sort of
all the
response
dates
after the
have.
former councilwoman brought it up again. I thought that we had some sort of report, but maybe that was an old one that we,
We'll bring that to
Okay.
closure by the next meeting.
okay, very good.
I can send you my earlier email, if that would be helpful.
Yeah, I'll probably mark it, I'll get back to you. Have it. Okay.
Okay, is that it? We're ready to adjourn at,
7:39.
oh, okay, 7:39, adjourn the meeting of the Santa Ynez Community Service District. Adjourn, boom, meeting. Oh,
Well, thank you all for putting up with my crazy schedule.
Hey, Frank,
ah,
Frank, did you pick your Porsche up there?
No, I did not.
Well, you know, it looks just like your Porsche. It's been driving around. Look like a couple kids from the high school. Round the block on two wheels.